All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive today into a story that's way more than just some duel.
Yeah,
We're talking about the Burr-Hamilton tragedy, and I think it's safe to say most of us know the basics, but today we're going beyond those.
absolutely.
We're really going to understand the context, the nuances of this event.
Right.
And to help us do that, we've got excerpts from a podcast on dueling history and culture. It's honestly pretty fascinating.
Oh, it really is.
So to kick things off, I mean, when we think about dueling, what comes to mind? What's that initial image?
I think for a lot of people, they just think, oh, Wild West, anything goes.
Yeah, kind of like a free-for-all.
Right. Two guys out in the street. But actually, it's got really deep roots.
Okay, so less like a dusty shootout and more like what?
More like thick, ancient ritual combat,
Okay, now we're talking. Give me an example.
like Viking home gang.
Home gang, yeah, I've heard of that.
Brutal way to settle disputes. The two guys would fight it out, and literally, the gods decided the winner.
Wow, so we've gone from Viking gods deciding to like gentlemen with pistols at dawn.
Right.
How did we get from point A to point B?
Well, it took centuries.
Yeah.
That idea of a duel transformed.
Yeah.
It went from these public brawls into like a really structured, almost civilized system.
So it's less about brute strength now.
It became less about that and more about defending your honor,
Okay.
primarily among gentlemen.
So it became a gentlemanly thing. Interesting.
And the weapons changed too. That kind of reflected these evolving social dynamics, right? So axes and swords, they gave way to the more refined pistol duels
Oh, I see.
in the 18th century.
So basically what started as a fight for survival turned into like this performance of social standing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the lengths people went to protect their honor, it's astounding.
Okay, give me an example. Like what kind of lengths are we talking about?
We actually found this insult from a court record. It called someone, get this, the squirt of a kite and the spawn of a crab louse.
Wow.
Imagine if today's Twitter insults led to duels.
Oh my gosh. I'd be loading my pistol as we speak. But seriously, that's a whole other level of sensitivity.
It really is. It's a completely different mindset back then.
Yeah.
And I actually came across this account of a BDC correspondent whose ancestor dueled his bank manager
Whoa.
after being struck with an umbrella.
So they dueled over an umbrella. That's wild.
Right.
It seems almost comical now. Why all the fuss over an umbrella? What was the big deal?
It's not about the umbrella itself, right?
Right.
It's that perceived insult to one's honor. And that's where this idea of dueling codes comes in.
Okay, dueling codes. Tell me more about that.
So these codes, they attempted to regulate this whole practice. And actually, surprisingly, they weren't just about ensuring a fair fight. They were about more than that.
So more than just choosing your weapon and your distance and all that.
Yeah. They aimed to prevent unnecessary bloodshed, believe it or not,
Okay.
by laying out a framework for apologies and reconciliation.
Oh, interesting. So they tried to avoid the duel if possible.
And they even detailed the roles of the seconds. So, the seconds weren't just witnesses.
Right, they were more involved.
They acted as mediators, negotiators, and even, you could say, enforcers of the rules.
Enforcers. You mean like making sure everyone followed the rules?
Exactly. And get this, sometimes they were expected to, and this might sound crazy, shoot their own principal if he violated the code.
Whoa, wait a minute, hold on. So if your friend is dueling and they don't follow the rules, you're supposed to shoot them.
That was the expectation in some cases.
Talk about a high-pressure job.
Yeah, really shows how deeply ingrained this concept of honor was back then.
Totally different world.
Absolutely. And this wasn't just a European phenomenon. I mean, dueling crossed the Atlantic
Oh yeah, for sure.
and took root in American culture.
Absolutely.
John Lyde Wilson, he was the governor of South Carolina. He even wrote a dueling code in 1838.
Okay.
And get this, it was based on an Irish code.
Oh, wow. So we're importing these ideas.
Yes.
So this idea of honor, this ritualized combat, it's alive and well in America. Makes you wonder how some of our founding fathers navigated this whole complex social landscape.
Well, take Andrew Jackson, for example.
Oh, okay, yeah. Old Hickory.
Known for his fiery temper.
Yeah, he had a bit of a reputation.
It was definitely a duelist,
Yeah.
believed to have fought in over 100 duels.
Over 100. That's mind-boggling.
I can't even imagine the pressure of living in a society where any disagreement could escalate like that. And it's ironic because a lot of duels, they didn't actually result in fatal wounds. Infections were a bigger problem.
Really?
Yeah, like from embedded clothing or lead balls. That was more likely to kill you.
Right. That's interesting. I never thought about that.
But in 1806, Jackson was in a duel, and his pistol misfired.
Uh-oh.
Now, according to the code, that should have been it.
Right, his shot.
That was his shot.
Yeah.
But he recocked and killed his opponent,
Oh, wow.
blatantly disregarding the rules.
So even with these codes, things could get really unpredictable, especially with someone like Andrew Jackson involved.
Right.
But speaking of duels that broke the mold, I think it's time we talk about the main event, the Burr-Hamilton duel. This one, I mean, it just stands out, even in this whole crazy world of dueling.
Definitely. I think what makes this duel so fascinating is that animosity
Right.
between Burr and Hamilton. I mean, this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing.
Yeah.
This tension had been simmering for years.
So this wasn't just like hurt feelings, there was a deeper history there.
Absolutely. It started back in 1791 when Burr won a Senate seat from Philip Schuyler, who was, Hamilton's father-in-law.
Oh, yeah. Not the best way to start a friendship.
Right.
So that's bound to create some friction. Sounds like their rivalry was just as much personal as it was political.
Exactly. Then in 1801, Burr published this document written by Hamilton that was pretty critical of John Adams, the president at the time.
Oh boy, adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah. It just strained their already fragile relationship.
So we've got political maneuvering, we've got personal grudges. This sounds like a powder keg waiting to explode.
Oh.
What was the final straw that led to the duel?
It was a series of, these heated exchanges,
Okay.
culminating in a public insult that Burr just couldn't let slide.
Right.
So he challenged Hamilton. And at that point, Hamilton felt he had no choice but to accept.
So even though Hamilton, I mean, we know he personally opposed dueling, especially after his own son was killed in one just the year before,
Pretty tragic.
but he felt trapped by these social expectations.
Exactly. And to add to the tragedy, the pistols used in the duel were the same ones that killed his son.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the weight of that history, the emotional burden of those weapons.
Chilling detail. It adds a whole other layer of complexity to this story. And the location of the duel is also significant, right?
Weehawken, New Jersey.
Weehawken, we've all heard of it. Why there?
Well, it was a popular dueling ground
Okay.
because the laws across state lines were more lenient. They were literally crossing state lines to settle a score.
Wow, it sounds like something out of a movie. So they meet in Weehawken, pistols in hand, bad blood boiling. What happens next?
Well, accounts of the actual shooting, they vary.
Yeah, makes sense.
Some say Hamilton intentionally misfired. It was a practice called deloping, where the duelist fires into the ground to avoid bloodshed,
Okay, so almost like a symbolic gesture.
Yeah. Others claim his pistol discharged accidentally due to that hair trigger.
Ah, the hair trigger. And speaking of hair triggers, the source material actually includes an experiment testing how sensitive those pistols were.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Really gives you a glimpse into the mechanics of these weapons.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how those tiny details could have such huge consequences. But I won't spoil the results of the experiment. You have to listen to the full episode for that.
Right. Got to keep people on the edge of their seats.
A little cliffhanger. But getting back to the duel, we know the tragic outcome. Hamilton dies after 31 hours of agony, and Burr, while never convicted of a crime, faces legal scrutiny, public outrage, essentially ending his political career.
A story that raises a lot of questions about honor, ambition, the consequences of those social pressures.
Yeah, for sure. It really makes you think about how American history might have unfolded differently if Hamilton had lived.
Right. A big what if.
Big what if. But I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from Viking battlefields to the refined world of gentlemen's duels, explored these complex dueling codes, and delved into the specifics of the Burr-Hamilton tragedy. What a story.
Absolutely. Just goes to show dueling is more than just two guys with pistols.
So much more. So much more.
It's amazing when you think about it. Dueling was still a thing in America, even as it started to fade out in Europe.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like we were holding on to this idea of honor, even when other places were moving on.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there was something uniquely American about this whole fascination with duels. This very specific concept of honor.
That's a really interesting thought. And dueling wasn't just limited to politicians and military men either.
Right, it was everywhere.
It was woven into American society.
Totally.
Even our literature reflects that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Think about Mark Twain's The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County.
Oh, yeah, classic.
I mean, of a funny story.
Yeah.
But it also shows you how deep this whole dueling thing ran in the American psyche.
Yeah, we're still talking about the Burr-Hamilton duel centuries later.
Exactly.
It's not just some historical footnote.
It's this cultural touchstone. And it's a story that keeps sparking debate.
Yeah.
We're still arguing about what their motivations were,
Right.
the details of the shooting, even whether Hamilton intentionally misfired.
Yeah, all these unanswered questions.
Layers upon layers to unpack here.
Okay, so let's go back to the duel itself for a second. We know they met in Weehawken, but what was the actual setup? Like, how far apart were they standing? Paint me a picture.
So picture this. You've got this secluded spot overlooking the Hudson River.
Okay.
The opponents would stand about 10 to 12 paces apart.
10 to 12 paces, that's not that far.
Any further, and hitting your target with those smoothbore flintlock pistols would be a matter of luck.
Basically. So it wasn't about, like, pinpoint accuracy. It was about
Right.
something else.
It was more about ritual.
Okay.
And display of the seconds would carefully measure out the distance.
Right.
They'd mark the spot to make sure everything was by the book.
Really meticulous.
Think of it like this carefully choreographed dance,
Okay.
but with incredibly high stakes.
A deadly dance.
Exactly. Once they were in position, there was no turning back.
Wow. So even if you wanted to apologize at that point, it was too late.
Pretty much you were locked into this performance, and the consequences were potentially fatal.
And the seconds, they played such a crucial role in all of this.
Yeah, they did.
What were their duties exactly beyond just loading the pistols?
Their main job, honestly, was to prevent the duel from happening.
Really?
They were the mediators, the negotiators, trying to find some kind of peaceful resolution,
Okay.
or at least an apology that would satisfy both sides. But if the duel couldn't be avoided,
Right.
their job was to make sure it was conducted honorably.
So they were like the referees of this deadly game.
Exactly. What were some of the rules that they enforced?
Well, there was everything from loading those pistols
Right.
to dictating the actual rules of engagement.
Yeah. Would it be a timed duel? Would they walk towards each other? All of those details were carefully negotiated
Wow.
and enforced by the seconds, and if someone broke the rules.
That's when things got really interesting.
You said it, we mentioned earlier that they could even shoot their own principal.
Yeah, why would they ever do that?
It sounds crazy, right?
It does.
But their whole role was to uphold that code, even if it meant taking extreme measures.
Wow, so they were like the guardians of honor.
You could say that.
It's incredible how much emphasis they put on honor. It seems so foreign to us now.
It really does. It highlights how different their whole worldview was. Honor and reputation were everything, even those dueling pistols, they were a status symbol.
Really? So they were more than just weapons?
Often beautifully crafted, engravings, elaborate grips.
Wow, fancy.
He's all part of the ritual.
It's like having a deadly fashion accessory. It's so strange to think about now.
Yeah, it clashes with our modern sensibilities. But let's circle back to Burr for a minute.
Okay.
What happened to him after the duel? Did he just walk away?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too.
Well, dueling, it was technically illegal,
Right.
but it was often tolerated, especially among the upper class.
Okay.
But the death of someone as prominent as Alexander Hamilton,
Yeah. You can't just ignore that.
it couldn't be ignored. Burr faced public outrage,
Right.
legal scrutiny, even threats of prosecution.
So even though he was never convicted, the duel basically ended his political career.
Pretty much he fled to the South to avoid prosecution. And even when he came back to finish his term as vice president, his reputation was shot.
So that duel cast a long shadow over his life.
It really did.
It's a tragic reminder of the lasting consequences of dueling, even for the people who weren't physically harmed.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how did this practice that was so embedded in society just disappear?
Yeah, good question. How did that happen?
Well, it wasn't a sudden change.
Okay.
More like this gradual decline, a bunch of factors contributed.
Like what kind of factors?
More formalized legal systems emerged.
Okay, so the law was catching up.
Pacifist movements gained traction.
Right. People were starting to question violence.
And I think most importantly, there was a change in social consciousness.
People were starting to see things differently.
As society evolved, this idea of settling disputes with violence, it became less acceptable.
So what was once honorable was now seen as barbaric.
Exactly. Dueling didn't vanish overnight.
Right. It took time.
It lingered on in some places, but its hold on society loosened. By the mid-19th century, it was mostly seen as a relic of the past.
It's fascinating how social norms can change so much over time.
I know, right?
Dueling went from being central to their lives, like
Right.
this historical curiosity.
And yet we're still captivated by it. The stories, the drama, the characters. It just draws us in.
Yeah, we can't look away.
Maybe it's because it gives us a window into a world so different from our own.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. It also reminds us that history is full of contradictions,
Oh, absolutely.
and studying even the seemingly absurd parts of the past
Yeah.
can give us some valuable insights into human nature.
It encourages us to think about our own values,
Yeah.
how they might differ from previous generations.
Well said. And with that, I think it's time to move on to some final reflections
Okay.
on the Burr-Hamilton duel and what it can teach us about honor, ambition, and the complexities of being human. So we've really dug deep into this whole dueling thing, from those early Viking battles to the very specific rules and rituals that gentlemen followed. And of course, we've focused on that dramatic showdown between Burr and Hamilton.
Right.
What's so fascinating is that even after centuries, we're still trying to figure out exactly what happened that day in Weehawken.
It's true. There are these enduring mysteries surrounding the duel that just keep us coming back for more.
Like, what are some of those big question marks that still linger?
Well, I think the biggest one is what was going through Hamilton's mind that day.
Right.
Did he intentionally misfire? Was it a deliberate act of sacrifice, or was he just caught in this web of social expectations that he couldn't escape?
It's a tough one to unpack because we know he was against dueling, especially after his son died, but at the same time, he was very aware of his public image and legacy.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation to analyze.
Do you think his opposition to dueling was genuine? Like, deep down, did he really believe it was wrong?
It's hard to say for sure, but you can't ignore the pressure he was under. Refusing to duel would have been seen as cowardly, and that would have destroyed his reputation and his political career.
So, in a way, he was trapped by the very system he was a part of.
Exactly. It wasn't just about personal beliefs. It was about navigating this complex social code where honor and reputation were everything.
And that's what makes the Burr-Hamilton duel so much more than just two guys shooting at each other. It's about the clash between what you believe and what society expects of you.
It really is. It's about history,
Ah.
legacy, the weight of all of that.
It's a tragedy on so many levels.
Absolutely.
Hamilton loses his life, and even though Burr was never found guilty, he was basically ruined. His reputation never recovered.
Yeah, there were no winners in this duel.
Only casualties. But here's the thing, even after all this time, the story still resonates with people. Why do you think this duel, out of all the duels throughout history, why does this one still grab our attention?
Hmm. That's a good question. Yeah. I think it goes beyond the historical context. It's a story about ambition, rivalry, the fight for power, the fact that life is so fragile, themes that are still relevant today.
Yeah, you're right. It's like a timeless drama playing out on this historical stage.
And I think people are drawn to these larger-than-life figures like Hamilton and Burr.
Yeah, they were brilliant, but flawed.
Yeah, and ultimately victims of their own ambition and the social pressures of their time.
It's a reminder that even the smartest people can make really bad choices.
Right.
And those choices can have consequences that ripple out and affect so many other people.
And even though dueling is long gone, it's still a cautionary tale for us.
Absolutely.
It reminds us to really think about our own values, question those social norms, try to find peaceful solutions to our problems.
Well said. We may not have duels at dawn anymore, but those themes, ambition, rivalry, wanting to leave a mark, those are still with us today.
They are.
It's a good reminder that history isn't just dates and events. It's a reflection of who we are and where we came from.
And the choices we make.
This has been quite a journey. I mean, we've gone from bloody Viking battles to these meticulously planned gentlemen's duels.
We have.
We've explored honor, reputation, and all those mysteries surrounding the Burr-Hamilton tragedy.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, but as with any good deep dive, this is just the beginning.
Right. There's always more to learn.
Always more to explore, more to uncover.
And if you want to go even deeper into the world of dueling, remember that podcast episode we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah.
They even do this experiment to see how sensitive those hair trigger pistols really were.
It's definitely worth a listen. And remember, the most important thing is to think critically.
Yeah.
Don't just take our word for it.
Yeah.
Do your own research, form your own opinions, and keep asking questions.
And who knows, maybe you'll uncover some historical mysteries of your own.
You never know.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of dueling. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.